Good morning, everyone. Today's ACoM briefing with Senator Padilla is a special one. He's a special guest. We usually don't have a briefing on a Monday, but this is a good way to start the week. Mr. Padilla has been with us before, and let me remind you, he is one of California's 2 U.S. senators and also the proud son of Mexican immigrants. Senator Padilla recently made headlines after being forcibly thrown to the floor by DHS security in Los Angeles, despite identifying himself as a senator, highlighting critical issues in immigration enforcement. With a long public service career, from LA City Council President to California Secretary of State, and now since November of 2022, when he was elected to the United States Senate. He began serving in January of 2021 after being appointed to fill the vacancy created by the election of Vice President Kamala Harris. He is the first Latino to represent California in the U.S. Senate. The senator recently introduced a Visible Act, which requires immigration officers to display identification and bans non-medical face covering during enforcement. Today, we will discuss this with him and other issues. Welcome, Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Pilar, and thank you for inviting me to join the group again. It's good to be back with all of you. We have been through a lot together, from my days on city council, as you mentioned, my days as a state senator in the California legislature, of course, my days as Secretary of State, as you mentioned. Not only am I now in a different position here representing California, United States Senate, but since the beginning of this year, clearly living in a different time, a different political climate. It seems like a very different world since we last spoke. And so I want to begin again by thanking all of you as members of the media for your commitment to pursuing the truth. It's even more critical today than it has been ever. This is the second Trump administration, and it's not just that we're facing even more intimidation and legal attacks on the media. We're also facing drastic cuts in the budget, and we should talk about some of those impacts. We're facing mass deportations and even more fear-mongering. In the year 2025, it's hard to believe, but it's true. We're also seeing a Republican Party that refuses to stand up to Donald Trump's power grabs and the corruption that's clearly going on. The clearest example yet came when just earlier this month, Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress passed their top priority for Trump's second term. They decided that in order to afford yet another round of massive tax breaks for the rich, that working families were going to have to pay more, with $1 trillion from Medicaid being cut, kicking 17 million Americans off of their health care, and rolling back the historic progress that we made on the clean energy transition. This bill also adds an additional $170 billion to the budget for Trump's mass deportation agenda, a ramp up in their campaign of terror, what we saw just last week in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. So again, just to put the budget bill in perspective, we tried to shine the light on a lot of the cuts, nutrition assistance programs, Medicare, et cetera. The cost to the taxpayers of extending tax breaks. The only area of the budget that saw true investments was Department of Homeland Security and ICE. So they are setting the stage for not just a continuation, but an escalation of the cruelty of these mass detention and deportation actions, which we know are both bad policy and unpopular with the American public. There's new polling that demonstrates what we've known all along. And in addition to all that, I'm sure you all saw what happened to me last month when I was simply trying to ask a question at a press conference held by the Secretary of Homeland Security in Los Angeles, in a federal building in Los Angeles. Not just being physically forced out of the room, but put on the ground and handcuffed and without any explanation. Some of you might have been there and seen some of the footage. You heard me repeatedly asking, why am I being detained with no answer? But in the aftermath of that event, not a surprise to me that the Trump administration chose to lie about what happened. But thankfully, there was video that everybody was able to see for themselves. And as I said then, and I've been repeating it ever since, if this is how this administration responds to a United States senator who wants to ask a question, to try to shed light, try to get truth, try to get information as to what's really going on, then we can only imagine what they're willing to do and what they are doing to so many people in all corners of the country, but especially in Los Angeles. And even though we know the truth, because we hear it from the people being impacted, the administration is also willing to lie about that. We hear what they say about protesters. We hear what they say about migrants, about any community of color or anybody who's willing to disagree with them on policy. And so it makes your work more important and my commitment to my work, I think, more important. I'll continue to do everything I can to hold this administration accountable. So one of the ways, and Bilal teased it in her introduction, is my introduction of the Visible Act to require immigration enforcement officers to display visible identification and to ban non-medical face coverings. Because no one should have to wake up one morning and fear that they're being kidnapped by masked strangers. But on this and so many other issues, we in Congress can only be successful in holding the administration accountable because of you all reporting stories on the ground of how this administration is treating our communities. So I encourage you to keep reporting the facts and continue speaking truth to power. And with that, Pilar, I know there's a number of questions that we want to get to. And so thank you all for making the time, and look forward to your questions now.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Araceli Martinez from La Opinión. She has a really relevant question. Araceli, ask your question, please. Araceli?
Yes, hello.
Okay.
Hola, senador Padilla. ¿Me escucha? ¿Me
Sí,
escucha,
muy bien.
Pilar? Sí, gracias. I have a question. If we can change the composition of Congress next year, do you really believe we can stop Trump's actions against immigrants when billions of dollars have already been approved to further attack our community? Can we do something?
I do believe we can because, well, this fiscal year's budget has been acted upon. If we're able to change the makeup of Congress next year, if we can get a Democratic majority in the House or the Senate or both, then we're able to make the future fiscal year budgets very, very different than what the current Republican majority and Donald Trump have agreed on.
Thank you so much.
And in addition to that, because I think this is important to share, it also improves our ability to conduct oversight. Right now, members of Congress, both houses, but I can speak for myself and the Senate, we can still ask questions. We still make formal inquiries for information, for data from different departments and agencies, not just Homeland Security, but especially Homeland Security. But from a congressional standpoint and a committee standpoint, Republicans are in the majority. So we only have formal committee hearings, oversight hearings that they're willing to do, and none that they're not willing to do. So as Democrats, we've engaged in what are known as informally as shadow hearings, right? We will convene as a group of senators, all Democrats, and pick a theme, pick a topic, bring in experts to testify and answer questions, but they're not the formal official committee oversight hearing because Republicans don't want to engage in that. So again, if we're able to take back the House or the Senate or both, then congressional oversight takes on a whole new meaning. That's been part of the challenge this year. It's not just what Donald Trump is doing or not doing. It's not just his cabinet and other parts of the administration, but it's the lack of Republicans in Congress to do their job as a separate and co-equal branch of government to hold this administration accountable. And so, yes, while we're doing everything we can right now, we're also working to try to impact the midterm elections to change that dynamic.
Thank you. Claudia C., can you identify your media and can you ask your question quickly? Try to make it short because this is a very short briefing. Claudia.
Gracias, senador Alex Padilla. Quisiera que lo contestara en español porque estoy en la costa central, en el condado de Santa Bárbara y Ventura, y fuimos testigos de un operativo militarizado donde aterrorizó a nuestra comunidad. 1,000 personas estaban adentro de una granja y todavía hay muchos desaparecidos, ¿verdad? Ciudadanos, residentes, personas desaparecidas. ¿Cómo podemos encontrar a esas personas? De igual forma, el congresista Salud Carvajal no se le permitió entrar. Y por otro lado, también nos están amenazando a los medios de comunicación, a las organizaciones y a los líderes. ¿Cómo podemos ustedes protegernos ante esas amenazas?
Let me translate that before we go. So this is from Santa Barbara and Ventura County, what happened last week with this militarized ICE operation in Carpinteria and Camarillo. She says that many people are still missing, including residents and citizens. And she also reports threats to silence organizations, media outlets, and leaders. Senator.
Yeah. So first in English and then in Spanish. I think a couple of quick things. Number one, keep communicating to our offices. I know Representative Carvajal very, very well. The vast majority of the California congressional delegation, the Democrats at least, are communicating very frequently, not just with themselves, but with Senator Schiff and myself. The more we know of specific people that we are looking for, and the more we continue to inquire about who's in custody and where. It's not always immediate, but that helps us locate somebody sooner rather than later. And as we've seen, even not just a citizen, but a disabled veteran that was detained was recently released. That happens a lot more quickly when they know that the spotlight is on them. So I wish it was more immediate, but when there's more of us paying attention, they know we're paying attention and insisting on humane treatment, then the releases and the identification, the location happens much more quickly. Lo que le puedo decir es que siga, por favor, comunicándose con nuestras oficinas. La delegación de demócratas en el Congreso, inclusive el senador Schiff y yo, seguimos colaborando nosotros. Y cada vez que hay muchos de nosotros pidiendo la información de quién está detenido, dónde los están deteniendo, lo más rápido que podemos localizarlos, y como en el caso de un veterano que fue detenido, el resultado de dejarlos ir ocurre más pronto cuando esa presión del exterior sigue. Así es que sí, no pierdan la fe, pero siguen comunicando, por favor.
Senator, I want to go to a different question. Are you worried about the threats to take citizenship from people born in the U.S.? And do you think this will actually be allowed? We saw over the weekend the president threatening Rosie O'Donnell, a comedian, with denaturalization because he doesn't like her descent.
Yeah, look, on the one hand, I don't put anything past Donald Trump. He will say and try anything. Do I think he will end up taking citizenship away from U.S. citizens? I don't think so. That is an extreme of an extreme of an extreme tactic. You know, of course, that would be litigated. Not just the law, but the Constitution is very clear. That's why in some of the earlier confirmation hearings, when Attorney General Pam Bondi was before the Judiciary Committee as a nominee, and the Deputy Attorney General, and even some of the judges that have become before us, I'm asking these very specific questions to get them on the record, to recognize the law that has been upheld and what the Constitution says very, very clearly. But it doesn't mean they're not going to try, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to have to resist and continue to fight back.
We have so many questions. I'm just going to pick from some of them, the ones that don't seem repetitive. Nevin Kalepali, can you So ask your question and identify yourself, what media you're with.
Hi,
Nevin?
yeah. My name's Nevin. I'm a local reporter in Shasta County, with Shasta Scout. And my question is like sort of specific to this part of California. We have like unofficial citizen militias and even sheriffs who have indicated that they would work with ICE if asked. So given that ICE like doesn't identify themselves or follow basic protocol or legal conventions, have lawmakers discussed the role that vigilantes, either sheriffs or individual people, might play in abductions?
So combination of things. Number one, on the official side, whether it's a local police department, local sheriff department in California, they are still subject to California law. You know, for all the talk about sanctuary policy, sanctuary cities, even sanctuary states, I've had to continue to remind even some of my colleagues, both sides of the aisle, of what sanctuary means and what it doesn't mean. Does it mean the federal government can't come into California to enforce federal immigration law? No. What it means is the state of California will not commit its state resources or local resources for the federal government. We're not going to do the federal government's job, right? So that collaboration and coordination shouldn't be happening in any local jurisdiction that does not abide by the state law is subject to accountability by the state attorney general's office. And I know Attorney General Rob Bonta is definitely aware of that and monitoring that. The private groups, that's one of the reasons why I've introduced the Visible Act, because there's been reported instances, not just in California, but across the country, of people impersonating ICE officers, which is very easy to do when ICE is not required to identify themselves on their body, their uniform. They're allowed to mask up, drive unmarked vehicles. That is a very a big public safety concern for community and for the agents themselves, because you don't know how an individual or a community is going to respond to somebody they're not sure if it's law enforcement or not. The cases that we've seen of kidnapping, of burglary and theft, of sexual assault, the risk of those types of things happening goes up when you don't have that accountability measures for law enforcement. And what we're asking for with the Visible Act is nothing new. Other federal law enforcement agencies have that requirement of identification. Doesn't have to be their name, could be a badge number. That's written into this bill. We know the policies work because at the state level in California, local police departments and sheriffs all have the same requirement. So again, it's both for the safety of the agents and officers, safety of community, and to prevent against these impersonation attacks.
Peter, if you were on, can you ask your question regarding the polling? Peter
Hi,
Sherman.
thank you, Pilar, and thank you, Senator Padilla. It's wonderful to see you here. As you're probably aware, polling suggests that American attitudes are shifting currently as a result of everything that's happening around immigration. I'm curious what the conversation is among Democratic leaders as far as how they can sort of capitalize on this potential sort of opening, more favorable stance toward immigrants in this country?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question because you're right. I think those numbers tell me what I have known all along, what many of us have known all along. For all their talk there was about, well, Trump on immigration is strong, the Republican Party immigration, it always depends on how you ask the question. Right, because everybody wants a safe, secure, orderly, and humane border. There's never been a debate about that. We also want more humanity and fairness for long-term residents of the United States who happen to be undocumented. If you ask the voters about Dreamers, for example, overwhelming bipartisan support. If you ask about farm workers or other essential workers, overwhelming bipartisan support. But I think these numbers are now moving in a better direction and are being more highlighted, right? It's not just general approval, it's strong approval in the polls because of the overreach of the Trump administration. They're seeing the cruelty with which the administration is acting, and that is reflecting itself in the poll numbers. So I know there is an active conversation both amongst House Democrats and Senate Democrats, and hopefully there's enough Republicans with a backbone to try to act accordingly sooner rather than later. So I think it's encouraging, but we still have a lot of work to try to finally modernize our immigration system and laws that we've been needing to do for a long, long time now.
Oh, I'm muted. Juan Esparza Loera, can you ask your question? Identify your media, please. Juan Esparza. Maybe he stepped out. Okay, he says, do you plan on visiting any ICE detention facilities in the upcoming days? Have you visited them in the past? We recently heard some really alarming things about the alligator, Alcatraz, whatever you want to call it, but of many other detention centers. And there's another person here who's saying in Spanish, people are not getting medication. Where can we go? How can we complain?
Yeah, well, that's where at minimum the congressional visits to detention facilities is important to make sure that they're abiding by the required standards, the conditions that people are living in, the medication if they're on a medication for a significant condition, those sorts of things. I think I was one of the first to visit a facility earlier in the year when I went with some of my colleagues to Guantanamo Bay. Right, never would have imagined that there would be an ICE detention facility not within the United States. We know about the prison in El Salvador, that's a whole nother conversation, but the conditions in Guantanamo Bay, and of course, a lot of the domestic facilities. So I do plan on visiting more, but in the meantime, this communication collaboration amongst the congressional delegation, we're sort of, you go here, we go there, how many people are planning and announcing ahead of time versus how many people want to show up on short notice, so that the people running the facilities, we want to see the true conditions, not to cleaned up conditions because they know that we're visiting. So it's a combination, but we're going to have to keep that pressure on to make sure that everything that's happening is abiding by the federal law and federal standards.
There's a couple of other questions about what the Democratic Party is doing. Some people, if you look at the conversation on social media, you'll see people criticizing the Democratic Party, saying they're not doing enough. We know they're in the minority, but it seems that the Republicans, when they are in the minority, they find a way to make it about themselves. So how can we expect Democrats, the opposition, to do more?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of things. There's a lot that we're doing, and of course, we could always be doing more. It's also how we're communicating. And so maybe I need to encourage more of my colleagues to come and talk to you all directly. You know, it's one thing to go on one of your cable shows in the evening or put something up on our social media, but in this day and age, how people communicate, how people consume information is a lot more diverse. There's a lot more options. And so Democrats need to be in all of these spaces as well.
Okay, let's see. Lee Lovett, do you want to ask your question? Lee Lovett?
Yes. Hi, sorry, I found my unmute here. My question is about the indiscriminate workplace raids. And it's clear that with the agricultural industry amongst many, employing so many in the Latino community who have been longtime immigrants as well as recent immigrants, the employers are joining forces and trying to resist the raids in some places like Santa Barbara. But how could this be more widespread and systemic so that employers realize that they need to protect people and protecting the bottom line?
No, I agree with you, and I hear from a lot of employers and industry representatives also, you know, and I say, well, I'm on your side. How can you, as an industry, as an association, as a trade group, you know, pressure the administration? Like, you got to tell it to the president too. And we've seen at times glimpses of that. There was about a month ago, a day when Donald Trump was quoted as maybe not enforcing as intensely in agriculture, in hospitality, et cetera. And then, you know, he reversed that a few days later. But at least for the moment, some of the pressure was getting to him. I'm not surprised that he's focused on California, right? He's made no secret about targeting blue states and blue cities. I think that's single-handedly why it's especially intense in the Los Angeles area. Thankfully, I hope you all saw the court ruling from, I think it was Thursday, that sort of blocked the way ICE was going about it. They were making no secret about their profiling, right? When Tom Holman himself is on Fox News saying, well, it depends on their appearance, it depends on their occupation, it depends on their accents. He's talking about profiling. Profiling is illegal. And so they've been called on it. They've been challenged on it legally. The initial court ruling created what seemed to be a quieter weekend in Southern California. That's good news. But I also expect them to appeal, and who knows what the appellate court is going to say. And if this goes to the Supreme Court, that's still a little bit of a moving target. I also want to recognize, because we have a diversity of the press on this Zoom today, that when we talk about the immigrant community, people assume, well, it's all Latinos. No, I know very well in California, the immigrant community is also very, very diverse. A lot of people from Asian countries in California as immigrants, people from African countries, European countries, just from literally all over the world. So the immigrant community is also a very diverse fabric of our society, but one that is also organized and works very well together. So thank you for being on this call and for being a voice.
Senator, this will be the last question because we're running out of time, and there's still some questions left in the chat, so you have to come back at some point.
Okay.
What message do you have for all of our communities, many of which are represented by media in this call, who feel targeted or marginalized by recent federal actions and rhetoric? What do we do? What can communities do?
Yeah, I think there's both a short term and a medium term. In the short term, we can't say this enough. Know your rights. Regardless of immigration status, everybody has due process rights in the United States. This administration has tried to not respect those rights. As part of our job to hold the administration accountable to make sure people have those due process rights recognized and respected, like not needing to talk to an ICE agent if they don't have a warrant signed by a judge, right? The ability to talk to an attorney before you sign any documentation. Those sorts of basic things people need to be reminded of. There's a lot of advocacy organizations providing that type of legal support and advice. I think in the longer term, it's first, we can't lose faith, right? This country and our democracy is worth fighting for. That's why I do what I do. But we both have to prepare ourselves short term. And for the midterm elections, people who are eligible to vote, they have to register. For people who are registered, talk to your friend, talk to your neighbor, talk to a coworker, talk to a family member who may not be registered, because the ultimate political pushback is going to be at the ballot box next year.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we only had you for a half an hour. I know you're super busy. There's more questions, but we appreciate it. Gracias. Muchas gracias, Senador.
Thank you.
It's always nice to see you and to talk to you.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta